Streamline allows creating new projects by pulling data straight from the database of your accounting, ERP, or inventory management system. To do this, I'll go to New, Database Connection. The dialog allows connecting to any database that has an ODBC driver. In this tutorial, we're going to connect to an SQL Server database. First, we need to establish a connection to the database. In my case, I'll do this through a connection string. For an SQL Server, it looks like this, where server is the machine name running the SQL Server. If you connect remotely, server is the domain name or IP address or LAN name of the computer with the SQL Server. You also should allow remote connections to the SQL Server in this case. Database name, the name of the database you're going to connect to. There are two other ways to create a connection configuration to a database. You can build a connection string after clicking the Build button. You can also set up the configuration using the ODBC Data Source Administrator and selecting it from the Data Source Name drop-down menu. Finally, enter the account credentials, username and password. You need an account that has read permissions for the database. To test the connection, I'm going to click the Read button. This will read the list of database tables and show them below the button. You can read the content of every table in the list and see what's inside. Simply double-click on the item in the list, and Streamline will show the content in the bottom part of the dialog. The dialog has a set of tabs intended to execute and store SQL queries for reading or writing particular data within the database. To plan inventory, Streamline requires you to provide 4 pieces of data. Each piece should be returned by a particular SQL query. These are the transactions query, the item info query, the in transition query, and the pending sales orders query. To save the time, I'll use queries that I prepared beforehand. Let's start from the transactions query. I'll paste it into the first tab and click the preview button to show what it's going to return. For demand planning, you should return at least these 3 columns: transaction date, item code, and the number of units sold. If you're only going to plan your demand and don't want to import any additional descriptive information for your SKUs, this is all the information you'll need for your project. For inventory planning, you also need to return the on-hand change column, accounting for all changes, not only sales related. You should return 0 value for non-sales transactions in the quantity sold column in this case, as you see it in our example. If you need to plan your demand or inventory in an additional dimension such as location or channel, you should additionally provide the corresponding column. Our example has a location column containing the physical location related to the transaction. After you enter the query and click the preview button, the next step is to tell Streamline what the columns of the query result represent. To do this, I'll match each column to the most appropriate Streamline's data type from the drop-down list. Despite the fact that the list is quite long, most of the options are deprecated now and were left for compatibility purposes. There are 2 critical requirements for the transactions query. First, transactions must be returned in the descending order by date. Second, the transactions query must contain the start date parameter so that the query returns transactions starting from some specific date. Such a statement allows Streamline to automatically synchronize your data as you click the Update Data button. The last 2 steps here are: set the start date to import your transactions from. We recommend importing at least 18 months of transactional data. The second one, set the period your data will be aggregated in using the group timestamps by parameter. For example, if you want to plan your demand and inventory by month, select the month option. While the transaction query is purposed to return frequently changed dynamic information, the item info query should return descriptive information on each planning item that is mostly static. For inventory planning, this query must return the last on hand for every planning item, which is an item location pair in our case. Typically, along with last on hand, you would also provide lead time of the supplier and the order cycle values for every product in the catalog. If you don't, though, Streamline will assign by default 30 days lead time and your aggregation period as the order cycle. If you need to plan your demand by SKU or location categories, return a category column in the result of the query, like in our example. Streamline supports an unlimited number of levels in the categories hierarchy. As soon as the first category has been selected, Streamline adds a subcategory level into the list. Another extremely useful option here is the item info field. It allows you to import any additional column and then use its data, for example, to filter purchase orders suggested by Streamline. You can import an unlimited number of item info field columns. In this example, I'm also going to import item description, purchase price, and vendor code. There's only one requirement to this query. The planning item identifier must be unique within the returned table. For example, if you import locations in addition to item codes, the identifier is the item code location pair. If you do not import location or channel columns, the identifier is item code. In general, this query allows you to account for different business-specific situations like two-echelon planning, various constraints in inventory planning, planning products with a shelf life, and others. A complete description of all the data that can be imported by each SQL query you can find in our Help Center. The in-transition query should return transactions on items that are being delivered currently. Typically, they include information from open purchase orders and open transfer orders. The result should be represented by at least 3 columns: item code, quantity in transition, and expected delivery date. These are also accompanied by the location column as we use it in our example. Pending sales orders include transactions on open sales orders or back orders. The query should return at least the item code and expected shipment date columns. Quantity to ship is not obligatory but is highly recommended to import. In our case, we also add the location column again. The next 2 tabs allow accounting for other specific situations like disassembling kitted items and material requirements planning. The last 4 tabs are for exporting results generated by Streamline into the database. The first 2 of them to export the outcomes of min-max and periodic replenishment strategies, and the last 2 to export demand and purchase or replenishment plans. After all is set, click OK to import.